Ci siete tutti. Buonasera, ho iniziato bene, buonasera, vabbè. Allora, buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. We're coming to the very end of the legislature, and I must admit, I'm quite moved. We started our zero waste campaign 5 years ago, and I'm very glad to see that today I'm here amongst friends of myself and the members of the Five Star Movement. Why have we organized this meeting today? Well, we come from the region of Campania, which, despite all its problems and its bad reputation in some instances, is a beautiful part of the world. It's really extraordinary in terms of its beauty. Think of the Vesuvius. Think of the terraced hills along the coastline. Think of the little ports and the lemon groves. These are postcard pictures which we all have in mind. And these are souvenirs, as it were, memories which we we keep with us. But there's a problem. Now, my mother comes from the Amalfi region, from the coastal region, and I myself, as a tourist nearly, realize that the landscape is changing. It's changing because of consumer patterns and tourist flows. I remember as a child, I used to go to Maiori, 2 or 3 meters into the sea, and you'd see seahorses and urchins and what have you. If you were to do that now, all you would find in the sea would be plastic bottles, plastic labels, waste of all kinds you'd find on the bottom of the sea, which are stuck there until covered by a layer of seaweed, and that is where they remain. Now, tourism is important, let me say that as well. Among the industries which are growth industries in the European Union, you definitely have tourism and leisure. So there's no doubt about the fact that tourism is of the essence for the economy of our region. But having said that, we must also bear in mind that the numbers of tourists who come to stay in our beautiful region, their sheer numbers are changing the economy and the amount of waste being produced. In a popular touristic center, 70% of waste, solid urban waste, produced during the tourist season is produced by tourists, which means that if we really want to change the country, if we want to have an environmental footprint which is of the appropriate nature, we cannot neglect this problem and we cannot ignore it. In fact, we must indeed tackle it. Now, some time ago, I was in Salerno with Pino Apicella. We met to deal with other subjects, and we got talking about this. And he told me about this marvelous project which they have set up, which is called Hotel Rifiuti Zero, zero waste hotels. The idea being that they would encourage hospitality and accommodation facilities to produce zero waste. In other words, they want to reduce the impact of waste which is produced. And then I said to myself, well, we're in Brussels. There's a 5-star movement delegation in Brussels. 5 years ago, we said that we would bring the stars of our movement to Brussels. And this is a battle which we must wage here, a fight which we must engage in. We would like the EU, the European Commission, and the European Parliament to take these concepts on board, which is why I've proposed a pilot project to the Committee on Budgets of the European Parliament to create a brand or a label, if you will, which would cover all the good practices of this project which is being implemented, this zero waste project. And of course it must also be financed. The problem being that you have to create actions which are funded so as to ensure that knowledge is disseminated throughout the member states of the European Union, and so that we create a critical mass. I saw what happened with copyright. If the public is not informed adequately, you get nowhere. So to inform the public at large, to inform European citizens of this, to reduce the impact on the environment, we have to create something which is visible, which means that we have to create a brand or a label so that all the businesses, bed and breakfast restaurants, hotels, all of those who are engaging in this process be recognized as such. We're in a a mass communication era. We're submerged in information, and sometimes we can't see the wood from the trees. So that is why I've asked the European Commission to create a label or a brand which could be identifiable which would be given to anybody, any facility which would be involved in this project. Could I introduce you to the speakers on my left and on my right? And as they take the floor, I will give you a brief introduction to who they are. On my right-hand side, I have Alfonso Iaccarino. I'm honored to have him here today. I'm very pleased to be able to host him and to listen to what he has to say to us today. Then Antonino Esposito, who is the person in charge of the Zero Waste Hotel project. Emilio Esposito, chair of the Association for Zero Waste and a Sustainable Environment, which is a non-profit making organization. And we also have Giuseppe Apicella and Luciano Ricciardi. So first of all, I pass the floor over to Alfonso. Don Alfonso, apart from being one of the first, if not the first, chef in southern Italy to receive Michelin stars, he is also somebody who is an example for us, because if you don't make an effort, you can't get the world to change. And he's been very, very active and is active. He has always believed in our region. He's always believed in the products which are produced in our region. And he also believes that it is possible to innovate. And I'm always fascinated when listening to him, because there's so much to learn from you. So, Don Alfonso, you have the floor.
A tutti. È inutile.
Good morning, everyone. Now, of course, I don't need to tell you how proud I am to be able to take part in such an excellent project with such extraordinary friends who have the same ideas as I do. I would also like to thank Mrs. Adinolfi, who is a fighter and a committed member of Parliament, working harder than anyone. I'm very grateful for the invitation. I'm just going to tell you a bit about my story, my life story. I manage the Don Alfonso restaurant, as the Member of Parliament said. I've been doing, well, I started it when I was 18 years old. I am from one of the bigger hotel families from the region, and I also have a passion for nature, for food, and I changed directions. I started studying in hotel studies, but then I changed to a restaurant. I've been very lucky in my life, and I've been able to achieve excellent results. Now, of course, there are other requirements in this kind of work: a high standard of living, respect for people, and of course, respect for the environment. I travel around the world. The other night I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about all the countries that I've visited. I tried to count them, and I managed to get up to 92 different countries that I'd visited. And we have consultants who we speak with on all 5 continents. I'm lucky in that my wife is very active. She's also an entrepreneur in hospitality. My children are following in my footsteps, and I hope they'll manage to do even better than I have. I mean, I think I live in paradise. I live in paradise every day, and I can learn things from this. In particular, looking at products from local regions. When I've gone around the world, I went to France to study, but at the end of the day, I came back home. And the ingredients that I use are tomatoes, bufala, mozzarella, extra virgin olive oil, products that are known around the world. And all of these things help to increase my sensitivity to the environment, to flavors, to fragrances from my own land. In 1990, I sold my family home and I bought a piece of land that had been abandoned for 30 years. And that was when I started to understand that the only way we can really protect the environment was through healthy organic farming. I'm seeing excellent results with this today. And it can be seen as a general example to all. When people say, no, you can't really have organic farming, it makes me laugh. Now, my colleagues will know more about raising animals than I do, but you can't have animals that are raised in 1 meter squared because you've got to be able to eat them within 50 days. When you do these kind of things, you forget about the environment. Now, when I speak to farmers, sometimes they say, you know, that lorries full of waste going away every evening. And it started to make me think, because we can't go on like this. So I started a project with friends who are working throughout Italy. And I think that we can be one of the best examples in Italy of what we're doing. So what do I do? All of my vegetable waste from the restaurant, together with all my family, there are about 60 people. So just the even just the wet waste represents a great deal. Waste pasta goes to the chickens. The vegetables are fed to animals. And also bread. Any restaurant will have a lot of leftover bread and pasta, organic material that can be used. And then I started to think, what can we do to fertilize the land if we want to have organic produce? And the first thing I thought about was
Le bucce di arancia.
No, it's very rich. We started to think about how we could compost all of our leftovers from the restaurant, and that's used on the land. And the products that we grow are excellent from this. And if I can do that, why can't others? So why don't we make a cooperative? Why can't the city do that? Why can't the whole Naples province and the whole of Italy do the same? It's just one example that I would like to share with everyone else, because I think other people can do it. Recently, we've managed to achieve almost 90% separate sorted waste. And this is fortunately something that even the European Parliament's looking into now. Last year we managed to solve the problem of water bottles. I can see them out today. It's a bit of a shame that you have plastic ones instead of glass ones. But we calculated that basically in 1 year, if each consumer had a bottle and a half of water, it was about 1,500 bottles per month. So we're talking about 13,000 bottles a year. And also the families, so it's 2 compressed blocks of plastic, basically. And so we decided to try to do something about that. Everyone's given basically a cup that they can refill when they want to. They can drink as much as they want, and that's how we solve the problem. And we're seeing excellent results, because even the local authorities are taking notice. They're seeing the costs as well involved in handling the waste, and that's something that everyone can do. And if we do this kind of thing, we can help with public health. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. Sometimes I forget my words. But if we want to see sustainable agriculture, we have to avoid toxins, chemicals on the land that over time can lead to health problems for our clients, for people living in our area. We also are planning a system to look at our animal feed. Looking at the feed that they're fed and the waste. Now, of course, vets say they should be given feed, but proper animal feed. But there are interests at play here. But there was a study done on 60 dogs in Italy. Dogs that just eat what's left over at home, like they've always done. Dogs eat everything. They'll eat bread. I remember my grandfather had hunting dogs, and they would go around the hotel and take up all the waste that was left over. Dogs that are fed on dog food, I mean, a half an hour in the car and they'll be driving you mad. Whereas dogs that eat the same as us, they're fine in the house. They have fewer tumours. They have better health over the long term. And that's based on a study that's been done in recent years. I have over the last 40 years tried to defend artisanal work when it comes to food and gastronomy. I am personally committed to trying to support small-scale cheese producers, meat producers, everything that I need for my activities. And I'm seeing excellent results. Not economic results, because to be honest, at my age, a bit more or a bit less money doesn't really make too much difference. An intelligent person who loves their people, their territory, can live with very little. Because if you're interested in these kind of things, then Monday doesn't mean very much. At my age, as long as I can eat and drink, I've seen almost everything. I don't need to travel so much. So my passion is the land, as well as my work, which is food, which is gastronomy. So it's a great satisfaction to me to see that, thanks to my commitment over the last 50 years, I'm held in esteem wherever I go. And for me, I think that's the best wealth I could ask for. We have to, of course, fight for the environment. We have to ensure that we take our responsibilities vis-a-vis our children, our grandchildren, who will be the third generation to manage these restaurants. And I think that's what we should be fighting for. I think we all need to understand the importance of the work that we're doing. And we're doing that with the help of the kinds of people that I'm seeing up at this table, my friends, who I'm very proud to be amongst today. Thank you. If anyone has any particular questions, if anyone wants to ask for any advice, I'm of course more than happy to speak to you.
Facciamo direi il giro prima.
Well, let's first of all listen to all our speakers, if you agree, and then we'll go on to questions afterwards. Is that all right? Right. Our next speaker is Emilio Esposito. Now, myself and Emilio, we have known each other for some time now, just like Pino. Now, Emilio has a university degree in communication science, and he created a movement in Nocera called Citizens as Protagonists, and he's also chair of an association called Zero Waste for Campania and a Sustainable Environment. Well, good morning. As Isabella has already said, myself and Isabella have known each other ever since she started her election campaign. And let's hope that she will be elected next time around as well, so that she will be able to continue her work in this area. We started off 10 years ago. This is a very, of course, very long process. We've been working hard on zero waste along with Paul Connett and many others. And we then decided with Antonino Esposito and Don Alfonso to continue to work on a sustainable environment and zero waste, working in our region. And our first objective, our first guideline, was to ensure that we would protect our planet. Sometimes these concepts seem to be so far away, and yet they really have an effect on our daily lives. And that is why my first slide shows children. Let's remember that we must leave the world to them, and let's try to avoid destroying it. And it has been partly destroyed already. We must always bear that in mind. To go on now to the second slide, I would like to talk about marketing. Now, Isabella has already explained that I have a university degree in what is known as communication sciences, but I deal with marketing and communication. Isabella has, or Don Alfonso has already explained what environmental sustainability is all about. We've been working on a project now for 5 years. Antonino, Don Alfonso, and 30 other facilities, 30-odd facilities, have created a type of Italian environment-friendly network. It's a type of made-in-Italy environment-friendly network. But very often, environment-friendly, made-in-Italy products aren't recognized as such. This is because of counterfeit, of people using Italian names for their non-Italian products. And who produce, therefore, their counterfeit goods without the genuine Italian know-how behind them. So last December, we went to the Ministry for the Environment in Italy. We presented a project encouraging an environment-friendly approach in accommodation facilities. The idea being to promote sustainable tourism. We're suggesting good practice in terms of the environment in the tourist sector, and this in turn would have an impact on our daily lives. Tourists are attracted by environment-friendly accommodation facilities, and people opt for environment-friendly structures and centres and respect these facilities for making the protection of the environment a part of their brand and their image. There already is an eco label, a European eco label, which already exists. And we have been able to see that there are a number of initiatives which have been taken in this area already elsewhere. But we're fairly stubborn and determined. We wish to obtain even more results and produce a cutting edge. And how are we going to do that? Well, looking at the slides here, what we would like to do, now I know that the slide is rather small here. You mightn't be able to read it. Now, this gives you hotels and restaurants and beaches who are given a certain number of stars. Now, some of these facilities have managed to ensure that 96% of the waste is sorted. And what we're suggesting is that we believe that this is a model which could be applied. This is a model which we have devised and which can really lead to tangible results on the spot. So we're not talking about theory here. We're talking about what we can deliver locally. Now, it's not just a question of producing labels or lists of things to do or things you should not do, but we also need to lay down a number of things that we definitely must not do. What should we do? Obviously, we need to work hard, roll up our sleeves, and do something about our accommodation facilities and our hospitality centres. They're an example which is there to be seen by all travellers and tourists. So we don't want to just produce abstract lists. Isabella has already submitted a project to the Committee on Budgets, and I would like to thank her for doing that, and hopefully this project will be approved and will help us continue with our work. This does not require huge investment, but the investment which is available must be targeted towards the protection of the environment. We must not indulge in do-it-yourself, in a do-it-yourself attitude. Many entrepreneurs have that sort of mentality. But no, we need to trust people who've already achieved, who've already done things, to make sure that we go for the right solution. We should not just think, we shouldn't think just in terms of the short term. We must think of the medium and long term. There's no point in trying to obtain results overnight. There are no shortcuts. There's no ad hoc approach, which is a valid one. We need to think more in terms of the long term. And we must glean from the experience acquired in the Sorrento area, in the various hospitality and tourism centres. Now, a label can be very important, and a label is useful in terms of communication for an entrepreneur. My marketing colleagues don't know that there's such a thing as a marketing mix. What is a marketing mix? Well, it's the very essence of commerce, of trade. It's a cutler's peas: product, price, placement, and promotion. I would add a fifth point, which is a planet and respecting the planet. So 5 P's. But in any case, the consumer is becoming increasingly aware of the consequences of what we do on the environment. They're no longer just a niche. There are more and more people who are far more aware of the situation when they buy products, whether it be a question of food or clothes or anything they need for the house, just to mention a few sectors. So a tourist is also a consumer. And a tourist is not just the individual who is surrounded by advertising, by commercials, and by the media. Here you have a picture of tourists on holiday. They've gone for a nature holiday. And what do they want to find? They want to find an environment where nature is being protected, the landscape is being protected in terms of the sorting of waste and in terms of the distribution of what belongs to the community, such as water. There should be ways and means of being able to find drinking water supplies. And environment-friendly consumers are definitely a part of the market which is on the increase. And many companies have understood this, and they've already started to work in terms of a circular economy and respecting the environment. But this does not suffice. We know that in Parliament there's been quite a heated debate on European legislation. And as far as I remember, the Commission rejected certain proposals. We hope, however, that decisions will be taken in the future and that certain ideas will be taken on board by both citizens and institutions, but all institutions, not just the European ones, but the national and the regional ones as well. We need these ideas to be recognized so that we will, in turn, feel that our work is being recognized. The municipalities must be aware of the fact that we are reducing waste. They don't have to collect the same amount of waste from us as they do from others. So that means savings, and those savings should trickle down to the bill we pay for our waste collection. Now, environmentalists, they opt for certain choices. And they're not always well perceived by those who aren't particularly aware of what the environment is all about. Which is why we have already started working on a number of initiatives. We have one hashtag slogan, a bit like Greta did. No, I'll say it afterwards. It's on another slide. There's a hashtag anyway. Saturday for Sustainable Tourism. So there's special Saturdays. So we've copied Greta's idea, which is for a Friday, and we're organizing our activities on a Saturday. So at this crucial stage of the operation, we hope that other facilities will join us in our quest for greater sustainability. But we can perhaps gain a competitive edge over those who do not join our ranks, because many consumers do care. And by looking at the social media, websites and so on, and offline sources as well, they like to find out about where they're going. Without necessarily indulging in mere storytelling, we have to do more than that. We have to inform people who are available, who really want to stay in environment-friendly places, who understand the importance of the environment. We want to help them know what we are doing. So this is a strategy which stems from the environment and what is called by some as the environment-friendly niche. Many people don't want to go from the traditional production cycle to the circular economy cycle, because they're afraid that they won't be able to amortize their investment and make a profit. But they're wrong. There is a way, also thanks to the commitment of institutions, there is a way to create incentives favoring a circular economy. So it's industry which has to turn the page and opt for this new solution. And if industry doesn't do that, we will only represent a very small part of the circular economy. We want to ensure sustainability from beginning to end. Now, Greta, we've all seen Greta. Greta has become a symbol, this young girl who's spoken to the United Nations, who said that we're running out of time, that the scientists have said that we've 11 years before reaching the point of no return. So if we do not implement engaging and bold policies, we will reach that point of no return very quickly. So we have all been struck by Greta and by what has been said. And we, too, said to ourselves, we must give examples, we must communicate. Just doing something, it does not suffice. You've got to communicate as well. And that's why Greta has been so successful. She's mobilized millions of people throughout the world. Well, as of this morning, hopefully, with the link which has been made available, people can hear us from their homes this morning. And hopefully we will be able to ensure that people are more aware of what is being done and what needs to be done, not just in Italy, but outside Italy as well. There's the hashtag I mentioned earlier on. Saturday for Sustainable Tourism. So, one of the last points which I'd like to make today has to do with corporate social responsibility. Very often, it's described as taking on board the social and environmental concerns of companies in relations with their partners. So if a company is responsible, socially responsible, well, sometimes it's a question of legislation, and legislation doesn't always necessarily provide for the appropriate measures. But there is a certain moral responsibility which we must all shoulder vis-a-vis the environment, but also the local community, as Don Alfonso said. It is possible to invest more in a sustainable economy with human resources. And this holds true for all of the stakeholders involved. So we've got, it's important to invest in a responsible way in technology, and above and beyond legislation, companies may have the cutting edge and be more competitive on the market as a result of their commitment to these environment-friendly goals. And to the goals which we established many years ago. Although maybe we should have done more too. Which takes me on to the next slide. Now, I've already referred to communication. Just coming to the end now of my presentation. This is our task. We've got to communicate. We've got to communicate the fact that there are products made in Italy which are environment friendly. At the moment, we're the only people to refer to environment-friendly tourism with hotels and restaurants which produce zero waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we're really at the heart of what we're talking about today. The zero waste projects. Antonino Esposito came up with and is working on this project. And has also been involved in a project that has been heralded all over Europe. And perhaps if there's time, you could tell us a bit about it. And thank you very much for being here. Good morning. I'd like to thank Isabel for inviting me here and for giving me this opportunity. When we started over 10 years ago now, to follow the work being done on zero waste, we realized that most of the waste being produced in the region, in tourist cities, we estimated it to be about 70%, as Isabel said, were as a result from tourism activities, from hotels, etc. And so we had to do something to act on this economic activity. The first few years were extremely complicated, extremely difficult, because imagine what it's like going to a hotel and trying to get them to change what they've just taken for granted and done automatically for the last 20 years. We had to help them understand that 20 years ago this might have been all right, but it's not anymore. So the first action, just the little sugar packets in a hotel, even doing that seemed impossible. So we started with sugar packets. I'd also like to thank the first hotel that believed in us. It was the Concarato Hotel in Sorrento, and it actually was the first one to be awarded the zero waste recognition. But the hotel managers understood that, okay, they could try it and see if what we thought was right or not. And that set them off on a path whereby today, 6 or 7 years later, they see they're on the right path. We started with the sugar. Then we had zero waste breakfast with dispensers. 20 years ago, the only producer of these kind of dispensers for jam, for example, were in Switzerland. Now you can find them everywhere. Now you can find them in all kinds of hotels. But 6, 7 years ago, very few had these kind of dispensers for jams and spreads. And over the last few years, actions taken by us, other organisations, the European Parliament, even member states, and journalists as well, all this has meant that gradually people are starting to pay more attention to this kind of thing in hotels and similar structures. Now we work with about 40 hotels. A couple of years ago we started working with Don Alfonso's restaurant, and we've seen significant results. We have 90% separated waste, but my question is it more important to get 90% sorted waste or eliminate plastic? I would rather we got to only 50% separated waste, but that they produce very little waste. It's no point getting to 90%. Of course, that's important. 90% is good. But there has to be a reduction in the first place. The most important thing is reducing the waste you produce to start with. When you go to a restaurant or a hotel, we've seen the 25,000 plastic bottles reduction. That's what's important. Okay. If we continue to have those 25,000 bottles, yes, we can separate them and recycle them, but it's better not to use them. For me, what's most important is reducing the waste in the first place. I would rather see hotels and restaurants that are completely plastic free. There shouldn't be any plastic in hotels. It should be completely eliminated. And we need to ask where there's the most waste. The highest quantities of waste are wet waste, plastic and glass. In Italy, we also have the empty returns as well. That's a problem. It started 2 years ago, but it wasn't properly communicated. It's quite difficult to take part in it. No one was really involved in it. So we went to the Ministry of Tourism and put forward a proposal. And we suggested that you should make this return system more widespread, but it has to be very complicated. You don't have to have people filling in files saying, yes, we have put in 10 returns. It has to be easy to do. And it has to be economically advantageous for business people. Now, there are a lot of different local authorities in Italy. If one has a tariff system then in place, then restaurants in some will be paying less. If they're located in that authority, they're going to be paying less than others. In the south of Italy, you need to have incentives. The environmental consideration is the most important, but you have to encourage, incentivize business people. And then instead of just one restaurant being involved, you might have 20 or 30. That's what we're trying to see. We want business people to know about this and to want to be involved. Not just to see little stars and brands when you go into the entrance of a hotel. Sometimes there are just a few questions that they have to answer. Do you split your waste? Yes. How much? 60 to 70%? Yes. But what's left for the hotel or restaurant owner after that? When I have meetings, what I always say is that before we start off on any kind of sustainability projects, you have to look at what's there. It's like doing a blood test to set out the parameters. What we do is we say you produce this much plastic, this much paper, and then afterwards you can intervene and try to solve the problem. You have to have knowledge, experience, and you have to have entrepreneurs who want to be involved. It's not always easy. We put forward a proposal to the Environment Ministry, and we said in 2019, and this is something that the European Parliament should be looking at as well. I think it's even more complicated here. But in 2019, you have different types of hotels. For 5 stars, there are so many different parameters, but there are no environmental parameters taken into consideration that. So a 4-5-star hotel, a 5-star luxury hotel, don't have any environmental criteria to fulfill. They should have to. We suggest that you should take a point away from them. If they don't get to 90% separated waste, you take them a point. If they have too much plastic, fewer points. Just 4 or 5 easy criteria that can easily be applied, and see whether hotels actually apply the system. You need a genuinely sustainable internal environmental policy within hotels. Otherwise, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to see the same people, or new people, but saying the same thing. We're just going to be repeating the same thing over and over. And legislative progress is going to be limited. I believe that in the coming years, even months, things are going to change. I've seen just in the last year that people are paying a great deal more attention to this kind of thing. The difficulties are the same. There are political problems. Mayors might not be quite so visionary. Some business owners don't really believe in it because they don't really know enough about it, or because they just don't have enough information. They're not informed properly. And that's our job, to inform hotel owners and restaurant owners, and it doesn't cost anything. They have to understand that it won't cost them anything. It's an economic advantage. Rather than going 100 bottles of water, I would urge you to undertake an initiative, going and buying bottles of water. The European Parliament, instead of paying for all these bottles of water, whatever they cost, there should be water fountains. There are water fountains. People should go and fill up before they come in. It saves the EU money, saves plastic. Is it complicated? No, it's not. It's something we have to do. And this is the same thing that we have to do in hotels as well, that are producing so much waste. Yes, it's difficult to achieve zero waste today, but going from 100 tons of waste to 40 tons of waste and separating 90% of the waste for recycling, that's a significant step. It's something you should be shouting about. That's why I'm so happy that I've been given this opportunity today. I'm happy to see so much activity, and even in big hotels, that they're interested in taking part in these initiatives. Every hotel has its own history. I was at a convention. I'm not really in favor of all these different marks and labels unless they're very clearly defined. But there was one mark for one type of hotel. Everyone was involved, bed and breakfast hotels and so on. After they spoke, I said every hotel, they're all different. There's full board, bed and breakfast. There's all kinds of different hotels. If you're trying to do something in every hotel, you have to do it differently. And this is all feasible. It can be done. We have the people, there are hotels and restaurant owners who can demonstrate that this kind of project can work well. Because hotels have seen results in the coming years. The return system is going to be compulsory. So if Don Alfonso opens a restaurant in Emilia-Romagna, for example, that applies to a certain region, he's going to pay less if he meets the criteria than one that doesn't. And after 5 or 6 years, it'll be better for everyone because the customers are going to be more aware of this. It's not just that consumers want to go to a hotel and go to sleep and leave. They pay attention to this kind of thing. So they will be aware of the environmental features of the hotel. It's a boomerang that will come back to you. There's the zero waste bin on the slide if you keep going forward. Here it is. So this is the zero waste bin. So I would ask you, in your own homes, in your bedroom, do you have a little waste paper bin? A little waste bin. This is the first question I asked, the first hotel that used this. We communicated. Now a lot of hotels use this system. We provided information. If there's proper information, we say there are these bins in the room. There's a little bin in the bathroom and you can use it for any waste that you may produce. Some types of waste, glass for example, you can leave it on a table. Outside you have these bigger bins. To put this in the corridors of the first hotel, it's the same as the sugar packets. One hotel used it to begin with, now they all are. It's nice, it's nicely designed, you can sort your waste. It's not just a question of what hotel ranking you're going to get. We have to think about the environment. That's it. Thanks.
Grazie Antonino.
Thank you. Well, you always need the economic incentive to get people to move. But at the end of the day, if it gets things done, why not? And the important thing is to get started, because people then copy. Well, I'm going to turn to the other side of the table here. I'm going to pass over to Luciano Ricciardi. He doesn't come from Sorrento, although he has moved there. And along with Antonino Esposito, he's been working on this environmentally sustainable project and zero waste for hotels. Now, he's in charge of development. What do you mean by that? What is your task exactly in all of this? Well, good morning to all of you. Now, the person in charge of development is the person who puts on a tie and goes to explain to a hotelier why this whole process is worthwhile. Because my colleagues, my distinguished colleagues, have explained to you today what can be done in terms of environmental sustainability and how it can be done. But I have the greatless task of explaining why hoteliers can and indeed must engage in this. But of course, as soon as you touch this subject, the entrepreneur reacts immediately by saying, but this isn't worth it. And you can really see this in a very obvious manner. Here today, we're surrounded by plastic bottles on the desks, on the tables here. So people prefer just to open their plastic bottle, which is straight in front of them, rather than go out and fill their glass at the fountain. They don't like to come in with their own flasks for water. So that's what we have to do something about. It should be clear to everybody that there are two economic models at stake here. You've got the so-called linear economic model, industry processes raw materials, and which in turn leads to products which eventually have to be disposed of, and these products create waste. Now, we used to bury our heads in the sand about this waste, but now we realize that the quantities are such that we can no longer hide away from the fact that we have a waste problem in the sea and elsewhere. The region of Campania is also known as the Terra dei Fuochi, an area which has been contaminated by landfills containing toxic substances. So, unfortunately, we are suffering as a result of this poor image which has been conveyed. And then you have, on the other hand, the other economic model, the circular economy model, which is more environment friendly. But we have learnt over the years that economic models are successful when one particular model appears to be more successful than others. And that is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm working to convince entrepreneurs that it is to their advantage to do things in a particular way as opposed to another way. And I don't want to be too lengthy in my presentation, and I want to base my comments on concepts more than figures. I'm not going to be referring to quantities and figures, even if the figures are based on scientific facts. They don't always suffice to convince people to do things one way as opposed to another. If something is economically advantageous, we engage in that economically advantageous procedure, but then we fall ill, what's the point? Sometimes you might be better off doing something which is more expensive, but keeping your health. So maybe we should all be working towards a healthier environment, which in turn should lead to healthier living conditions. So we can't whittle things down to the cost of an economic model. There are three arguments which militate in favor of this approach, because I hope that at the end of this conference you will convey a message, and the simpler the message, the easier it is to convey it. Now, the first logical argument to be put forward is the following. When you follow a particular procedure, there are at least two types of costs involved. If a good is being produced, and that good then becomes waste, you pay for both the product and the waste produced by that product. People often go to supermarkets to buy food, salad, for instance, lettuce. Very often it's wrapped in one portion packages of plastic. So there are two costs involved. You've got the production cost, the overheads, but then you've got the cost of disposing of the wrapping. So we have several types of costs involved. So if the waste we produced can be recycled, well, then we're reducing costs. When I go to a bar or into a cafe or whatever, well, my kids call me the waste man as well. People know that I deal with waste. And I explain that depending on the type of waste, entrepreneurs can save. Now, Alfonso is an excellent testimonial of this type of experience. If glass bottles are provided, people don't have to order plastic bottles of water. There are a lot of man-hours required for ordering plastic bottles. Tap water is a lot cheaper than bottled water. And if you use tap water, you don't need to process and dispose of all the bottles. And disposing of bottles requires labor. And if you can calculate the man-hours, you can see that there are costs. So it's possible for an accommodation facility, a restaurant, to save by simply serving tap water as opposed to mineral water. There's another logical argument which you can put forward, and which is pretty self-evident and does not need to be corroborated by scientific data, and that is a healthy environment. Now, we are all aware of the plastic issue, the plastic which is found in the sea, in the Pacific Ocean, plastic which is found in the stomachs of animals living in the sea or along the coast. So the economy, our economy must take these extra costs into account. And if we go for a circular economy, we'll be reducing less waste and therefore saving. With the linear economic model, there is a cost to be calculated in terms of the health of our environment, which is an additional cost to be added to the bill. And we're already footing that bill in a number of areas. We have the problem of the environment, Sometimes we need to reclaim the land or sea. What about all the plastic in the sea? Are we going to wait for a few million years to go by before doing something about it? Are we going to fish it out of the sea and process that plastic? And then we've got the health dimension as well. What about the public health bill? There are many illnesses caused as a result of an unhealthy environment. So there too, you don't need figures. The situation is pretty self-evident and speaks for itself. There's another logical argument which you can put forward, which has to do with tourism. This is the area in which we work. When you go on holiday, now here we don't want to generalize things too much, but generally speaking, it's the rich people who go on holiday. Not everybody can afford a holiday. So a holiday is a luxury good, but it also represents an economy, and it is a sustainable and cyclical type of economy. And within certain limits, there's plenty of room for improvement. It can be a guiding sector, can be a driving force, and it will become so increasingly in the future. Now, I've referred to a number of concepts which colleagues also mentioned, but I've tried to focus on certain specific issues. My point is, when we go on holiday, do we opt for a place where there are mountains of waste? Or do we opt for a nice, healthy environment? Hopefully with not too many people, too many tourists, so that it isn't overcrowded. So do we like to go for a nice, clean, healthy environment or a place which is filled with waste? Well, the answer is obvious. And we Italians could speak for hours on end on how important tourism is important to the Italian economy. But what could we achieve if we improve there too? You hardly need figures. We can all give ourselves the appropriate reply to that point. We all know how useful a change in our model would be. So I would just dwell on these logical arguments. They're the arguments which we can convey, and we can all engage in this communication process and promote these values and these new ways and means of promoting the economy. And is this new economy, is it all that difficult? Is it all that complex? Can you not just drink tap water and buy vegetables which aren't wrapped? I can just go to the farmer around the corner who lives nearby, or another vendor who doesn't package his fruit and vegetables. But look at Don Alfonso, he's 72. He looks young. He's the living proof that a sustainable environment is what it's all about, and I'd love to age the way he has. Now, I have one more point to make, which is that with a linear economy, whereby a good is produced and this good produces waste, well, that linear economy takes the incinerator as the solution into account, and presupposes that incinerating waste is the way out. But before I left for Brussels, a piece of news, an item of news, just caught my eye, and I just printed this. it says here that in Piacenza, the citizens set up a committee to ensure that an incinerator is not built in the vicinity of the city. Now, a lot of people think that incinerating waste is the answer. Why do people not like incinerating facilities to be set up close to their home if they think that these incinerators are not harmful? That's the question I've never really been able to fully understand. Now, since I'm here in Brussels, and since it's the European Parliament, I hope you'll allow me some poetic license here. And I'd just like to quote a little episode which has nothing to do with environmental sustainability, but it's on my chest, and I need to get it off my chest. Now, a few months ago, on Facebook, I saw a member of the European Parliament inviting colleagues to support the European car industry. And this member of Parliament said, "When I was young, I liked Alfa Romeos more than another German brand," which I just can't even mention it if you don't mind. "But now," said this MEP, "we have to support the German car industry." Sorry, I had to get this off my chest. Could I just say to that MEP, you can't play around with people's feelings. Alfa Romeo will always remain Alfa Romeo. Thank you.
Scusa. Ma il cuore, al cuore non si comanda.
Va bene.
Thank you very much. So, saving the best for last, a friend, a colleague from the movement, and a waste expert. Someone who we've worked with a great deal on these topics. I didn't know as much before I spoke to the next speaker, and he's been involved in a great deal of the conferences that we've been involved with in Campania, in Italy, and here in Brussels. Pino Piccella. In 2009, he met Paul Connett, and from then on, he set out on the zero waste strategy. So a type of waste management which tries to, instead of looking at something as a waste product, looking at as a raw material that can be reused. He organized the first meeting on this in the south of Italy, and then founded the movement called Impact Zero, and that was the start of all of these projects. He tries to promote the idea of no waste, a zero waste market, and using solar energy in schools, for example. He's recognized as an environmental campaigner at European level, but and particularly for the Five Star Movement.
Quante cose che ha detto.
Well, that was quite a lot of information. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you, because today I want to talk about something that's very much linked to what we've heard so far. But I don't know why. It's something that often is hidden or not spoken about. So I'm here to make a proposal to my colleagues and to members of the association and people who've been working with us over the last 10 years. I've set out a list of what my association's been doing. We've carried out the zero waste campaigns in Campania. To begin with, we had 16 reports in Salerno, in my village, between Sarno and Salerno. We've also carried out little events with schools, and they're the ones I like the best, because you learn a lot more when you work with children. We also had the Let's Plant It campaign, planting trees, a lot of other things that I'm sure you know about. This year, after 10 years on our journey, it was our pleasure to be recognized as part of the zero waste to around Italy. But we're not just working on zero waste, because there are other problems that don't seem to be linked to this. We know we have the 10 steps of zero waste, but there's more to it than that. This is the first event that we carried out in Salerno this year. There was quite a good level of participation. It's true, you often see the same people, friends, people who I know, but also new people who hadn't been before. So we are seeing that there is more awareness. People are starting to learn more about it. And today, I'd like to talk about topics that everyone is talking about. Pollution. We talk a lot about pollution. You're used to hearing about it. You see the kind of images that illustrate it. But we seem to be in a kind of stasis. We can't seem to do anything to take an initiative. But often initiatives aren't so difficult. There are things that you can do in your own home. What actions, well, what are the things that make the worst into a rubbish dump at the moment? You know, we all know about the plastic floating islands. You know, we are quite a special species. We can construct these islands of plastic. When we see these kind of photos, we all kind of have the same reactions. Now, we should all know these figures, how much CO2 is produced by human activities. And I don't think I need to spend much time about this, because I think most of you are very much aware of all of this. And you only just have to go onto the internet and you can find all the information you need, all the data that you need to understand this. And then there's the issue of deaths resulting from pollution, and that's on the rise. This is something that we find a bit frightening, but we tend to think, oh, it's something that's happening elsewhere, it's not really affecting me, it's not in my backyard. Although most recent data are providing quite worrying data. 1 child in 4 who dies is due to pollution. We're also seeing a whole range of cancers that are specifically linked to pollution. And we all know the solutions. There are simple solutions. We need to reduce how much we pollute. We have to plant trees. Instead of all these technologies, creating new strategies, engineering studies and all this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, this is the solution, and we know it. So it's our choice. Which side do we want to be on? At the end of the day, it's a choice. You can't choose when you're born, you can't choose when you die, but between those 2 points, there are a lot of choices that you can make. We don't always know the consequence of our choices, but as a human being, we have choices to make. Now, today, not tomorrow. It's today that counts. Tomorrow's probably too late. Now we know where our problems came from, the origins. Plastic is something that everyone's talking about. It's a problem all over the world. You can see a graph how it's increasing, what it'll look like in 2050. The south of Europe is a plastic trap because the sea is closed off, and so the plastic gets trapped. You talk about a plastic island, but what you don't talk about is what's under the sea, which is often worse. Nuclear waste, for instance, people talk about it a bit, a couple of people die, but you never hear very much about it. Now, tourism is what we're talking about today. I don't know why it's difficult to read this slide. I'm sorry, it seems to have moved. But I don't have a great memory. That's why I use slides a lot. Tourism has now transformed the places that we visit. It's a place where we create waste. And there's a slide that shows that where there is a lot of tourist activity, cities have 40% more waste. Now, I can't remember the statistics, but we all know that tourism is not great. It has a huge environmental footprint. And so we have to think about this, but we have to do it together and ensure that that my eco-sustainable, environmentally sustainable association goes into schools, into churches to speak to people, to go to different regions, different cities, introduce yourself to the Environment Ministry. Today we're in the European Parliament. That's because we have to think about this together. We have to stand firm together. Do we know what we have to do? We know that in tourism, we want to see more environmentally friendly tourism, zero waste tourism. We all know this, but we have to make more progress. The UN basically says that promotion, awareness raising do yield results. And this is something that we don't talk about a lot. The information has to be in the public domain. And so we have to move in that direction. We need to communicate. And we have solutions, we know solutions, but to achieve them, we have to start thinking about it differently. I'm moving on because I don't remember this one. The previous line was talking about tourism and focused on these two words, promotion and protection. But there's something that nobody ever talks about. It's something that seems to almost frighten people because it requires cultural change. It would change how we live our lives and our perceptions of ourselves. I don't know. You have to ask a question yourself. But sometimes we tend not to recognize certain problems, which are not small problems. These are things that most environmentalists say. Organizations, we need organizations at a global level to protect the planet. For example, the UN a few years ago said that we need to look at different types of pollution, water pollution, atmospheric pollution, pollution from factories, from transport, from trade, chemicals being used for everything, agricultural pollution. But is that it? This gentleman's quite rich and he's put $40 million into research, looking into what can help us do something about this pollution. He's put money available to ensure that something can be done. But I still haven't told you what I'm talking about. I don't know if you've realized. I'm talking about pollution, but there's one thing that I haven't mentioned. It's the most important thing that we are all aware of. It's farming and meat consumption. Now, you can say whatever you like, but the percentages, the numbers, I'm sorry that the slides aren't quite right. But the figures aren't up there, but you don't need the exact figures to see the trends. This is something that we can all do. Now, these colleagues who are here, who are working on zero waste, can meat be zero waste? Not after you've eaten it, but in producing it. Look at this photograph. No one will think about pollution. And yet, we have 7 billion people on the planet and 7 billion animals being farmed. 70 billion, sorry, animals. We consume 9.5 million tons of food. If we to raise 1.5 billion cows. We need 62 million tons of feed. Now, luckily, world organizations are starting to talk about this, but not everyone's ignoring it. But it's falling on deaf ears. They might put out the odd article, but then it seems to just disappear. And yet, this problem is a major source of pollution. Waste is 13%. Consumption of intensely farmed meat is up 30%. I don't have the graph, but imagine this is how prawns are farmed. Prawn production and farming has destroyed large parts of the sea's natural barriers that would have protected marine areas. So what does that mean, destroying these natural barriers? What impact is that going to have when it comes to tsunamis and earthquakes? Because they have to be taken into consideration as well. 28 billion fish have been fished. 28 billion. I can't even imagine what that looks like. If you put one behind the other, where would it get us? Moving on, this graph shows us countries where there's the highest consumption. The dark red are the highest consumption. Meat consumption. Now, I'm sure you know what's involved in meat production. Perhaps we can think about this together. I like to work together and to share things. There's not a single person here who can provide the solution. I'm not here to give the solution. You can provide a solution. You represent the possibility of something being done. It's not like someone's going to come down and tell you what to do. So you need 1,800 hectares to produce 36.3 kilos of meat. That's the figure. On average, this is the European average. If you go to America, it's even higher. But it's 85 to 100 kilograms of meat per person per year. You need 4.4 hectares of beef farming to feed one person. Now imagine there are 741 million people in Europe. How much land would be required to meet this demand? Is that sustainable environmentally? Is it something that we can afford going forward? If other people were to consume the same amount, what would happen? And why do we not talk about this? This is something I wonder. 10 years now, we've been talking about zero waste and pollution, and this isn't something that we talk about. This is the first element that should be looked at. It's the first element where it's very easy to do something, to make a significant change. I've tried to look for an answer to this. And I think there's probably something stronger at play here. Not even human health is more important than money. Does that seem strange? No. So we have to understand that people have been killed for saying this kind of thing. I don't want to name any organizations because I might be wrong, and I don't want to throw the blame on anyone. It's all of our fault. But we have to think about this. We can talk about everything we want, but this is the factor that has the biggest environmental impact. Dorothy Stang was killed. In Brazil, the meat lobbies are destroying the forests. 70% of deforestation is because of meat production. Moving on. This is just a suggestion to go and see this video. I've taken a screenshot. It's by an American filmmaker, and he asked all of the environmental organizations at global level be involved, and a lot of them didn't really want to get involved. So do we know what we can do? The easiest step we can take, I'm not even going to tell you. I don't need to even tell you because I'm sure you've all realized. We have to change our culture. And here there's a lot of work to do. We need meetings like this one, but that's not enough. We have to ensure that we organize throughout society. The world community has to do something about this. There are about 1 billion people who are now taking an interest in these kind of issues. Okay, it's only 1/7 of the world population, but it's still something. But we have to do more, and we have to do it faster. We can't just talk about you know, the other problems. We have to talk about this as well. Moving on. You can't read the slide, I'm sorry. But promotion, information is what's important. Sharing information, why is that important? Well, look at this. To produce palm oil, we're talking about 26 million hectares deforestation. Now, there have been adverts against palm oil. Palm oil production has dropped. And companies that don't use palm oil put it on the front of their products. No palm oil. You know, you can come and use my product. There's no palm oil. You don't have to worry about it. But it's 136 million hectares of deforestation for meat consumption. I mean, compare them. Imagine the table to compare those. So what does that mean? That's a choice that you can make tomorrow. Okay, using a plastic cup or a glass cup, you can choose that tomorrow yourself. And here I would echo what the gentleman to my left just said, Luciano. We have to be the ones to drive this. Companies, restaurants, hotels will respond to what people want. That's how the market works. If 100 people go and ask them to not use plastic, that means that hotels and restaurants will stop using plastic. If you go to a bar and say that you want glass, you know, the same. This is what you can do to raise awareness. You can all play a role. Yes, institutions, laws, they're important. But laws are only passed because citizens go to Isabel and say, this is what we need to do. You've got to go to the ministry. You've got to do it yourself. Citizens' lobbies. So there was a whole series of steps that you can take. The zero waste vegetables, reducing plastic, compost, reducing this and that, electrical energy from renewable sources. That's all fun. I've only got the last line on this slide. We need to reduce the meat that is produced from living beings. Imagine how much we could reduce. Imagine how much good we could do to future generations. Oh, we're going so quickly at the moment that if we pull the brake, it'll take too long for it to stop the car. You know, imagine you're speeding along in your car and you put the brake down, it still takes a while to stop. And that's where we are today. Today, we're the last generation that can still do something for future generations. We're the last generation that can make this choice. if we don't do anything, don't blame other people. It's our own fault. If it doesn't touch me to my core, it's my fault. I have to set the example. Look at this gentleman on the right. Everyone said he was mad because he tried to get hotels to embrace zero waste. When he went to the local authorities to ask for zero waste, they said he was crazy. Now it's something that everyone's doing. Governments, parliaments are all talking about zero waste. Okay, moving on, we're reaching the end. I'm not asking for a round of applause for me, for what I've said, but for this lady. She knew exactly what she was up against. It's like the people who are killed by the mafia. It's no different. The product's different, but it's the same idea. This lady was killed in 2005 in Brazil by 12 bullets because she said that the meat lobbies were destroying the planet. I'll leave you with that and ask you to think about what I've said.
Non resta a me.
No microphone for the speaker, unfortunately.
Perfettamente ragione, ma non resta a me.
No, you're perfectly right, but I'm not that powerful, is the reply to the inaudible question. Let's remember that this lady died because of what she did. The mafia must be done away with. There are people who really fight no matter what. There's no point in just talking about something, about saving the world. You have to engage. And we all love comfort and the easiest solution. Me too. But we have the knowledge now. We have the technology. There's a lot out there which has put us in a position to choose. So why not choose? NOW. And not eating meat. Yes, I agree with you. Well, not eating meat is a subject which we should all think about. Food for thought. Any questions then? Yes, at the end. Go ahead.
Salve, ciao Isabella.
Hello, Isabella. Greetings to all. I have a question about water. The speaker's microphone has gone off. Oh, back on again now. Water in bottles, and reference was made by Don Alfonso to dispensers and large bottles. I worked in Australia, and when I was there, I was able to see that in restaurants and hotels, customers were given a jug of water. And I don't believe that this was a particular entrepreneurial choice, but it was probably due to some national legislation. So I wonder whether there is some legislation. This is a question for Antonino and for Isabella. I just wonder whether we couldn't start encouraging a law to be adopted, even at European level, about this.
Ti dico la mia parte.
Well, I can say that rather than dispensers, I think this was filtered water. Well, Don Alfonso gave bottles, glass bottles, to the members of staff. But then there are other hotels, like in the Conker Park Hotel, there's a water dispenser on every floor, and the tourists are given a bottle to use. And the water dispenser is connected to the public water distribution network. It's filtered and then given to the tourist. So it's a bit like the little bags of sugar. So I always come back to that. Now we're beginning to see in hotels that there are bottles of water made available. There's no real problem from the HACCP point of view either. Hoteliers could adopt this. The only problem is in rooms. In the fridges in hotel rooms, you still find plastic bottles. And it's rather difficult to do something about that. The only thing you could do is do what this Sorrento hotel did, which was give somebody a water bottle and place a dispenser on every floor. So the water is provided free of charge. 1,000 litres of water costs $3.50. Think of the equivalent in terms of plastic bottles and what the cost is for the environment. By way of reply to the question asked, well, the idea was that it's not just an entrepreneurial issue, it's a question of legislation. But of course, Australia doesn't consume certain products the way we do. We have a huge effort to make because we have to deal with a whole mindset that needs to be changed. And we'll be working on this in the next 5-year period with Isabella, and we've been working already on this with Salvatore Micillo from the Ministry for the Environment in Italy. Before coming up with compulsory legislation, we're working on incentives for people who would invest in this type of system. So Antonino was talking about these water dispensers, and we're going to try to come up with legislation which would create tax incentives to people using this type of water dispenser, or training their staff to reduce waste and be more environmentally friendly. All of these things will be factored in. Could I add something? This idea of producing legislation. Well, I think that it would be rather complicated to do that, because there's one of the greatest businesses in the world. There are several multinationals behind mineral water, and it'll be very difficult to tackle them. We'll have a bash at it, though. We will try. These people have bought up all sorts of bottling plants, even in Africa. There are 3 or 4 European companies, I'm afraid I have to say, and they have their share of the world market. Could I just add something? There is a directive on water, and we worked on that directive. Now, we wanted to include far more principles than what was possible at the end of the day. We wanted to refer to universal access to water at any moment in time. If you're on a road and you want a drink of water and you have to go into a cafe to get it, you should be able to do so, but that idea was rejected. With regard to water consumption here, the water fountains, when we arrived in Brussels, there weren't any dispensers. They were set up about a year ago, and there too we had to fight for them. So we're sort of paving the way and winning people over gradually to the idea of using the water dispenser. So at the moment, we're in a transition phase. We've got these water dispensers outside, but in the meeting rooms, you still find plastic bottles for water. Then there's a third point I wanted to make, which is that there is a mentality issue here. Now, without going as far as Australia, when we go to France, in France, any restaurant will give you a jug of water free of charge. Now, I would challenge you to ask for a jug of water in an Italian restaurant without being thrown out or insulted. So I think that we really have to change our mindset and our habits. Let's face it, you always feel a bit shy about asking for tap water, but we've got marvelous water at Castellammare. We have water, public water, which comes out of the earth naturally sparkling, and it's thrown into the sea. And I think that this is sacrilege. We have a long tradition of excellent water in Campania, and we should be aware of this and tell ourselves that the water that comes from the source, such as the Castellammare source, is always a lot better. That spring water is always a lot better than anything you'd find in a bottle. Now, there are some restaurants who have lists of mineral water because the culinary experts, the journalists who come along to write articles about you. No, there are even sommeliers for water, says somebody. So they refer to all the properties of the water, the organoleptic properties. Unfortunately, that's the way the world ticks at the moment. There are economic interests at stake, and it's not easy to get people to change the way they think.
Molto simpatico. Mi chiamo Franco Pagamo, noi veniamo in delegazione da Castelvolturno.
We come from Castelvolturno. My name is Franco, and what we've heard today is very interesting, but in certain cases, well, there are people who've been working along these lines for 10 years and who are getting close to zero waste. And yet, the municipality is threatening to withdraw this person's license. This was a person who has an establishment on the beach. You'll find information about this on the web. There's a former university professor who's helping him and providing expertise. Now, you refer to the terra dei fuochi, to the contamination of our landfills and illicit landfills. Could I invite you to Castelvolturno to talk about this? Because there are many people who are interested in the topic. The project in question has been copied in Emilia-Romagna and in Tuscany and other municipalities. This person who's virtually reduced his waste to zero. Now, you live in Salerno. That's what we in Amalfi say about people who live in Salerno, but our paradise has been turned into a hell. And we still find ourselves in a quandary. We don't know who we have to go to. We've been reporting the situation for the past 10, 15 or 20 years, but nothing has budged. So could I invite you to Castelvolturno? Very often what happens is that there's a lack of communication about what is being done. A lot is being done. And this gentleman, in fact, manages to earn from the situation, but he's been threatened by the municipality. He won 3 or 4 court cases, and at the end of the day, the municipality had to accept what this gentleman was doing. So this is an interesting project, and please do come to Castelvolturno and come at any moment in time, because it would be marvelous to be able to talk to all of you people. You're so expert and knowledgeable. We could set up a project, because this gentleman is using this method. Now, we checked the situation out at considerable expense. This gentleman is managing to make money, but before making money, he had to put up with threats from the municipality, because we all know that there's a waste business at stake here. And in municipalities such as the municipality of Castelvolturno produces a large amount of waste. We have an issue with non-community nationals, and this is connected in turn to waste. And if we do have occasion to meet again, We have a person, a physician, or sorry, a physicist who's working on an idea. He's thinking in terms of biogas and how energy could be generated from the waste. So, could we invite Isabella to our municipality? We're working hard. We've been asking for certification, and we will be involved in the election campaign. So maybe Isabella will be able to come down our way too. Perhaps this could be an opportunity. Well, that's an invitation. We have several projects. Of course, the local football team, Napoli, trains in that area too. Well, this is a project which we were familiar with. We've heard about it. So let's say that there's a certain amount of civil disobedience regarding the payment of taxes and the like. Well, let's hope that the administrations, the municipal administrations follow us, as happened in the municipality of Sorrenso. Now, I'm thinking about other municipalities. There are neighboring municipalities where there are problems regarding animal husbandry and the waste produced by these cattle farms. So there are all sorts of problems which have to be dealt with. We would be delighted to come along at any moment in time. We travel all around. We would be quite happy to come. Thank you.
Sì, se mi consentite un...
If I may, just to add something about water. 100 years ago in Italy, Ettore Pepolini, the Italian comic, said that if you want to make money, you should go to the poor people. They don't have much, but there are a lot of them. And I would just emphasize this aspect of the economy. This is what the problem is. We can make all the laws we want. We can tell people they have to get up and pray to the cross. But what's most important, to work with the people from the bottom up. Individually, we don't have much power, but there's a lot of us. So if something's good for me and for you, and this picks up on what Pino just said, if something is good for a lot of people, and because of supply and demand, then that's when habits will change. Changing things on a cultural level is important, but it's medium to long, if not extremely long term. If we want to be effective, then we have to stop buying certain things, buy something else instead. Yes, it's true, says the chair. We have the power to decide what we buy. And read labels. Read labels. I'll never stop saying read labels. Antonio. On what Pino said, I think it's very interesting. And it's something quite new. But Isabel, in the European Parliament, is this something that you hear about? If it's not economically sound, then the idea of this meat idea won't change. You can actually do something about meat being less attractive. It's an important topic. And it's not just enough for me to give up meat. Plastic will stop because in 2020 there's going to be a directive. Single-use plastic. That's already something. Single-use plastics won't be produced anymore. People won't be buying it. You know, it's going to cost a great deal if you're going to have a single-use plastic buffet. So we're talking about economies of scale. Okay, a rather difficult question. Why should it be single-use plastic? The speaker doesn't have a microphone. Well, we're talking about organic stuff and single-use wood, for example. We might be single-use wood products. We're going to have some single-use products. There's nothing we can do about that, especially in tourism. It's almost inevitable. I know, well, you know, a plastic cup like this, you could use it 20 times at home, no problem, I think. I know it's difficult, but it would be a good thing if more people could be involved in this. Can I answer? Meat. Well, it will take a bit of time. How did we get to meat? Because meat was something that only rich people ate. Poor people didn't eat it. Oh. And then we saw that people wanted those products. And so that's how intensive farming came about. If we're to have... I can talk about chicken production. A chicken from birth to adulthood takes a year. Now we're saying in 40 days a chicken can be eaten. So you have to explain to people. I was involved in a congress in a university on this recently. I got a 10-minute applause from 2,000 students. Where is the problem? If we don't tell people that if you eat this meat, you won't be well. We need science to back us up here. Why doesn't science do anything? And we all know. So this is what we have to fight. We have to get people used to not eating meat. But, you know, we could eat it once a week. Meat can be easily substituted by vegetable proteins. I'm afraid we have to stop the interpretation now. I'm afraid there'll be no more interpretation. Thank you.
Possiamo mangiare, forse non basta nemmeno per la tavola rotonda qua. Mentre con un ettaro di fagioli possiamo sfamare una città. E quindi queste cose la gente li deve sapere. Ma se noi non li comunichiamo, come si incomincia a fare un discorso del genere? La carne diventa un prodotto. Quindi bisogna valutare questo fatto qua che è importantissimo. D'altronde la scienza diceva pure noi nel 2050 non so quanti miliardi di persone saremo. Dobbiamo sfamarne la gente. Ma scusate una cosa, ma se facciamo una bistecca di ceci, di fagioli o di lenticchie, cosa cambia? Una cotoletta di lenticchie, per esempio, no? Cotta e fatta a cotoletta. Il bambino la mangia pure volentieri, perché oggi quando a casa mi faccio anche la dieta per i miei collaboratori, ma sapete che il 70% dei ragazzi che vengono dalla città non hanno mai mangiato le fave in vita loro. Voi provatevi a mangiare un piatto di fave secche con delle patate e vedete se avete bisogno più di niente. E questo è il futuro, la gente lo deve capire.
Io volevo solo aggiungere una cosa, che ieri si è votato per mantenere i finanziamenti agli allevamenti intensivi, che si parla tantissimo di dieta mediterranea, ma dieta mediterranea poi in un contesto come questo sembra quasi una presa in giro, perché dieta mediterranea non è, se andiamo a mangiare in mensa per esempio, non è mettere un mucchio di pasta incollata di grano tenero accanto a un petto di pollo plastificato, no. quello che veramente io vorrei fare è la battaglia contro il cibo industriale. Quello sì, perché no, ma davvero la quantità di sale, la quantità di additivi, la quantità di coloranti e la quantità di zucchero che c'è dentro un qualsiasi cibo industriale è spaventoso.
Basta leggere le etichette, come dicevi prima.
Basta leggere l'etichetta, esatto. Questa battaglia, ma in questo contesto è ancora acerbo, per un motivo molto semplice. Qua fuori ci sono 30.000 lobbisti, usciamo e ci sono gli uffici di tutti quanti. Se la gente avesse l'etichetta grande così e leggesse tutti gli ingredienti che c'è, per esempio nel pane che si compra qui in Belgio al supermercato, che è un'etichetta fatta di 30 ingredienti, il pane 30 ingredienti. Per questo poi abbiamo le allergie, le celiachie, le intolleranze e tutto quanto. Io spero che nei prossimi 5 anni veramente si possa intanto combattere con una delegazione più numerosa, perché poi i numeri servono, e sicuramente, così come abbiamo iniziato con la battaglia con il grano canadese. Io conobbi i produttori di grano quando facevo la campagna elettorale nel 2014, i produttori di grano della Basilicata e della Puglia, che mi aprirono un mondo su i grani che venivano importati dal Canada, il grano loro, e mi facevano vedere le differenze. Così assolutamente è una battaglia che adesso dobbiamo invece concentrare contro il cibo industriale. Qui finirei, prima di finire però vorrei passare la parola a Antonino, che vi deve proporre una cosa, un'iniziativa.
Siamo rimasti in sospeso perché vi avevo chiesto un'iniziativa da fare. Noi raccoglieremo tutte le bottiglie di plastica in una borsa, faremo una foto qua indicando che mai più, un piccolo esempio che vogliamo dare, mai più plastica al Parlamento europeo. Se riusciamo dopo magari tutta questa plastica, queste buste insieme all'onorevole magari le posiziona proprio all'ingresso del Parlamento europeo per dare un segnale forte.
Iaccarino prima ha detto che lui sterilizza l'acqua. Iaccarino, scusi. Prima ha detto proprio così, ha detto sterilizzo l'acqua per i miei collaboratori.
Siccome lui si era espresso così o aveva trovato qualcos'altro, anche perché è registrato, no? E quindi voglio dire...